In this video, I'm going to be talking about attractors versus local maxima. It's sort of follow-up to previous videos about the sine attractors. And in that video, I went over the concept where you can think about development process, which here is this line. And you can think about it as you're trying to find a solution in some sort of search space. And in this case, we had like the axis where it represented various features. In my example, it was something like movement speed and jump height. And it's going to be the sort of Goldilocks zone. And as you're developing your game, you're always going to get attracted because the game is better in either of these zones. And this, can be good with really long jump heights, but slow movement, or vice versa. And you're going to be clumping together either of those, or be attracted to either of those. And that's going to form how the game actually turns out. And obviously there's not just two features, but there's a multitude of features that have a multitude of values, not just a single value. So the graph here is in reality extremely complex, like multidimensionally complex in a ways we can't really imagine. So we're just imagining it as a 2D plane. Now, after making that video, I came across another video, a recent one, called This Problem Changes Upside Game Day by Jonas Tyrolle. And in their video, they go over this similar concept where instead have an analogy of a fishing boat that goes around the search space, which is a lake, and it's looking for the lowest depth, which in this case would be the best possible game. And then you can sort of think about the search space as having various depths. So there's like these places like what I call the Goldilocks zones, or really like the sort of the deep abyssal pits where you can find the really good game designs. And that in doing a game, a big part of the design process, or the game development process, is doing searches in the space, trying to discover these things. So what I was then thinking about is, well, wait a minute, is this exactly what I've been talking about as well? Because I talk about these sort of attractors, and Jonas in their video talk about coming across local minima. And local minima would be a lot like here. You come across this and like, wow, I'm getting onto something here. Whereas in reality, there's like a much deeper depth, like a better game to be found if you're just to be moving elsewhere in the lake or in the sort of graph in your search space. And I talked about attractors, and it's like, is this the same? Am I just repeating something obvious here? But this annoyed me, and I'm like, this is not the same. This is what I'm thinking about. And I thought a little bit more about it and like collecting my thoughts on this. And I come across, no, it is not the same. And it's not the same for very interesting reasons. And that's what I'm going to be bringing up in this video. And in order to make sense of all of this, we need to think a little bit about the first example, which is the lake, which is thinking about the game as a search space where we're trying to maximize something. Where finding the best game is maximizing some sort of value. And let's think about this in how AI works when you're training an AI network. So you have something called weights, which is just numbers, A, B, C, D. A big AI model has like billions of these. And that all is fed through some black box, the neural network. You get some output, and then you evaluate that output, and you get a score. And simple example is that you have an AI that recognizes handwriting. Here's my crappy A, and if it manages to find that A, then it's like, wow, good score. And so what happens is that for an AI model, you have a search space, and which we can hear now instead of a lake with depth. Sorry for mixing up analogies, but I want to make it keep in line with what you actually call this in this type of research, which is a hill climbing algorithm called gradient descent. And you're trying to find the biggest top, and in this landscape we can think about each point as being a sort of combined score for all possible letters. So at this point, it might be very good at detecting A's, but really bad at detecting B's, and then the opposite is true for this point, as a simple example. So you have your weights as this a little person standing here, and this the weights here have a very limited field of view. They can't really see far. So they use this algorithm called gradient descent, where you take a step in one direction and you see, am I improving? Is this score getting better? And if it goes up, then it's like, good, let's continue in that direction. If it goes down, if it's worse, okay, let's not continue in that direction. And so by doing so, you sort of travel along this this landscape until you eventually hopefully find a peak somewhere where your AI model or whatever is its best. And so this is very similar to how this approach in terms of searching a space of various designs works. So you have your game, which we can think about as a collection of weights, where each weight is sort of like a feature or multiple values for the same feature. And you feed that through a black box. In this case, black box is testing the game, basically, playing the game on a computer or a console or whatnot, or on a potato. And then in the end, you get a score. And in Jonas's video, they're defining score as a mix of fun, appeal, and scope. Really, this is the big one. And the other ones sort of are additional important aspects of it. But you're really trying to see how fun is the game, and you're trying to maximize that. So when you have your game here, and you're going around the search space, trying out different directions, you're really doing two things. You're trying to maximize the score, so at any time you test your game, testing the waters or whatever analogy you want to be using, like measuring the depth, you're trying to see how big the score is, and you're trying to maximize it. And then you're also trying to keep the score above a certain limit. So you might find like you're maximizing it towards a certain point, but you're like, your goals for the game development, whatever, might be that that's just too low. It might be sort of, it's still getting good, but it's not getting good enough. And that's where you hit a local maxima, which is what I explained here. So the local maxima is here, and then you like what you're after is there. So really, in this sort of search space, in this fishing boat, you really don't care what you end up with. So this is the only thing you really worried about, is that not missing out on this big pot of gold at this abyss. So you don't want to like try and mine these. Like, these are good, I guess. Like, there's something good about them, better than here and here. But this is the best one, and that's what you want to try to find. So the sort of search process is finding this at, if we want to take it far, at any cost. So let's then think about what I mean. What I mean with the design attractors. And this is a different way of thinking about game design. So you have an idea. You have a creative goal with your game. And in this case, let's say, so this is abstractly thought about this light bulb. And let's say that you just want to make it very, very scary. So your game starts out here in the development process, and there's a path you need to go in order to find this idea, to realize your creative goal. But it's all shrouded in fog, and you are not sure how to get there, but you want to get there. So we're traveling again. We have the graph, we have our axes, which represent various features we may or may not have, and we start out with something that's pretty bad, not dull, and we want to take it here. So that's all we're caring about with traveling in this path. Now let's talk about design attractors. So when a design attractor enters the picture, it might go something like this. So I'm making this game, I'm trying to get here. I want the scariest game possible. But at this point, for some reason, we're like, perhaps we should add combat, like guns and ammo. Because the game at this point, I mean, no one really enjoys playing it at this point. And then when we add that, we're like, wow, we hit upon something here. Everyone loves shooting the ghosts. And now you hit upon a design attractor. So what happens is that you are diverging from your intended creative goal and ending up something instead. You can't, the moment you start shooting the ghost, then you're making a shoot 'em up game. You are not making your intended the scariest game ever game anymore. So this is a problem, obviously. If making a scary game is in fact your goal. And there's other ways this can happen as well. You can just start out with the game starts out with guns or whatever, and you can't really get out. You're trapped at the very get-go. So in making a game where this is your goal, you're trying to not navigate and finding your maxima. You're trying to sort of navigate not falling into any of these traps in order to reach the goal. And I mean, here we have the goal as if it was a specific position, but this is really like you have no idea how to get there or where it is, but you know that there are traps on the way. So think about, again, you can only really see this far. And you're trying to avoid all of these design attractors that's trying to drag you in, because the moment you give in to one of them, you're not gonna, you don't want to get here. You don't want to end up with that stuff. But if you're doing with this the boat analogy, where you're just trying to find the maximum depth in some sort of search space, you don't really care. Like in that case, if you end up with shooting ghosts is fun, the score skyrockets, let's say at this point or whatever. I mean, then your search is done. Like, wow, we found the game we wanted to make. That's different. This might not be a local minimum. This might be like a really deep trench. But since this diverges from your goal, in this case, we don't want it, even if it's very, very fun or whatever, because that's not really what we're searching for. It's a different search algorithm. And you can sort of see that, well, isn't this a change in the score, really? But that's the trick, because the only way, and this also goes into AI, I don't want to get too far, but score here is relatively simplistic, yeah? The moment you're scoring, like your evaluation algorithm gets too hard, it breaks down. And you see this in AI and so on and so forth. It's very hard. You need to, like the reason why large language models are so successful is because their scoring model is very simplistic. It's like, guess the next word. You can automate that process very easily. And in the same way, looking for a game where you want to make the most scariest game ever, you're not going to be able to do that in this process. It's too tricky of a thing. You need too many things working at the same time. This is sort of a bit outside of what I'm trying to, what this video is going to be about, but well, just wanted to that said. That's for another video to go deeper into the prototyping and so on, where you can get wrong. What I want to get across though is this difference between avoiding these pits, the design attractors, versus actively searching for them. And what we get then is actually a difference between a top-down approach and a bottom-up approach, where the one where I said about design attractors, that's really a top-down approach. You sort of start with an idea, then you're trying to find your weights in a way such that this is realized, and you're trying to, and then in the end you get the game. Whereas in the other approach, you sort of start tweaking the weights in various ways, maximizing a certain score, and then that's how you end up in game. And I mean, there's nothing intrinsically wrong with either one of them. Like, they're both fine, but it all, depends on what your vision is for a game, you're gonna have a really hard time if like making if you have a strong creative vision, like making a very scary game, if you're doing this way, to be honest. So, but still, I mean, it's not like black and white, so you can still use this sort of like search algorithm as you're traveling the path. So if you're like, yeah, we want to be avoiding the ghost in an interesting manner, then the avoidance tactics in your game is going to require some sort of search spacing and so on. So it's not like you totally leave any sort of value or score optimization out of the development process, but it's just that you're only applying it at specific moments. So hopefully that was helpful for anyone. And I think it's good to think about that difference, and that you're really setting yourself up for going into a trap if you're only thinking about score, if you have this sort of creative vision, like this goal, a more high level thing that you're aiming for. So good to think about what you're actually doing and what you're trying to achieve as you're developing your game. That's it.